So recently we found evidence of life on Mars. We found mineral deposits on the surface of Mars, which we've called leopard spots, that can really only be explained by microbial life. The microbes that would have created these would have been ancient, so they're long gone. However, it got me thinking, is life on other planets a lot more likely than we think? I'm going to argue yes, it is more likely. In fact, it's almost guaranteed. So I used to be a creationist, and one of the things that I used to argue as evidence for the existence of God is that life on planet Earth is incredibly unlikely to have happened. So for example, we live around basically the most, an average sized star that doesn't give off too much energy. It's not too big, it's not too small. We are placed in the perfect position relative to the sun to have liquid water. We're in the Goldilocks zone. The Earth is the right size. It has a magnetic field to protect us from solar radiation. We've got a big gas giant, Jupiter, protecting us from meteorites, so protecting us from life ending or worldwide extinction level events. So all of these different things that we need for Earth to have life. I used to say all of these things, how likely is it that all of these things happened? Very, very unlikely. Now, there are two problems with this. First of all, it's a little bit of a subjective argument. First of all, 70% of the surface of Earth is uninhabitable by us. However, the second problem is that it is a little bit subjective. We have adapted to live on this planet. However, you could argue that whatever sort of planet, there might be a sort of life that could exist. To go to an extreme hypothetical, if you have a lava planet with, lots of volcanoes, etc., perhaps one day you'd have some sort of sentient lava creature, and those lava creatures might look at a planet like Earth and they might say, wow, look at this planet, it's incredibly cold, it's full of oxygen, our planet, our lava planet's got lots of sulfur that we need to breathe, it's really hot, it's the perfect temperature, and they would argue that their planet is perfect. But what we're going to do is we're going to ignore something like that. We're going to ignore that hypothetical. What we're going to assume is we're going to assume that sort of carbon-based life is the only sort of life that can exist. Let's assume that we still need all of these things. And let's just assume that life as we know it is the only sort of life that we can have. Now that is a big assumption, but let's just make it. I would still argue, and I'm going to offer a counter narrative to the sort of creationist argument, that perhaps life on planet Earth is actually incredibly likely to happen, and in fact life on other planets is also incredibly likely to happen. So the basis of my argument is around astrophysics and astronomy, observations that we've made using telescopes. So I wanted to start off by talking about protostars. So all stars form in stellar nurseries, found in nebula. Most of the nebula is made of hydrogen and helium. This is the fuel for stellar fusion. But there might be other stuff. So what happens in these nebula is that gravity starts to take over and these gas clouds start to compress. They start to shrink in the sense that gravity pulls everything inwards. Now, as things fall, they'll actually increase in temperature. There'll be a certain part of the nebula that'll increase in temperature and more and more and more. It's hot enough to form a protostar. Now, what's going to happen if the star is too big? What's going to happen if it's a massive nebula and it forms a giant star, like a blue supergiant? Well, those giant stars actually don't live that long. I say live, don't last as long. So because they're so massive, they burn through their fuel very, very quickly. And once they burn through their fuel very, very quickly, what they do is they go supernova. And during that supernova, they create the heaviest known elements beyond iron. Now, what's very interesting is that because this process is quite rapid, once you've had a supernova happen, you're then more likely to get the smaller stars like our sun. In fact, the fact that we've got iron and heavier elements than that is proof that there have been other stars that were basically the remnants of supernova. To quote Carl Sagan, we are made of stardust. We are the remains of dead stars, which is amazing. So let's think about the fact that we've had a big star go supernova, now we've got heavier elements. Now what's going to happen? That supernova remnant remnant is going to form a nebula, and again it's going to collapse and it's going to form a protostar. Now what I wanted to focus on is during the process where a protostar starts to ignite, a couple of very interesting things happen. So first of all, when the protostar almost ignites, you get a lot of stellar wind pushing outwards with a lot of force. Now what's going to get pushed out the furthest? The stuff that gets pushed out the furthest is going to be the least dense material. What is the least dense material in our sort of proto-solar system? The least dense material is going to be hydrogen and helium. Most of the material within that early solar system is going to be hydrogen and helium. What happens to the more dense material? It doesn't get pushed out as far by the stellar wind. So you would get the more dense material closer to the protostar, and you'd get the least dense material on the outskirts, which explains why you have terrestrial rocky planets closer to our sun and larger gas giants further out from the sun. So what does this mean? It means that most stars that are forming after a supergiant star has gone supernova, most stars that are forming planets will have terrestrial and then gassy giants, and those terrestrial planets are going to be quite close to that protostar. But like we've said, most of the material is that less dense stuff. So you're more likely on the outskirts of your proto-solar system, you're more likely to have these gas giants that are incredibly heavy. So you're more likely to get super big planets like Jupiter, the sort of asteroid vacuum cleaners that protect the inner planets from asteroids. And your terrestrial planets will, through the process by which the planets form, are a lot more likely to be closer to that star and a lot more likely to be within that habitable zone. I think that's a really interesting thought, and it offers a really interesting counterbalance to the argument that things are very unlikely to happen. What if they're just almost guaranteed to happen? So maybe when planets form during the process of protostar being formed, maybe through the physics of the protostar, you're actually very, very likely to have certain things happen. Like you're very likely to have a terrestrial planet that's going to be within the habitable zone, and you're also very likely to have a giant gas giant that's going to absorb lots of meteorites. What I love about this is that you can actually see this happening. Here's a beautiful picture, one of my favourites in astronomy, of a planetary disk, and you can see these gaps around the protostar, and those gaps are more than likely protoplanets forming. We call this a protoplanetary disk. And you can see how many bands there are, so you can estimate how many planets are being formed in this protoplanetary system. And what's even better is we've taken a time-lapse of the process of planets forming. This time-lapse here has superimposed lots of photos taken over the course of many years of a planet forming near a protostar. I think that's amazing. So perhaps the conditions for life are actually surprisingly good. So you're very likely to have a terrestrial planet around a star. Maybe you're incredibly likely to have a planet like Jupiter that would protect that terrestrial planet from asteroids. Maybe you're also incredibly likely to have a giant moon. Maybe you're incredibly likely to have liquid water on these planets. And then maybe when you've got a terrestrial planet with water at the perfect temperature, and maybe the only thing that you need is just time for life to form. So maybe if we found evidence of ancient life on Mars, even if it's microbial, that's evidence that life on other planets is incredibly likely. Maybe it just happens all the time. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably more than likely wrong. But even if it's, not 100% guaranteed, maybe it's just a lot more likely than we think. So what's interesting is we've been looking for exoplanets. We've been looking for Earth-like planets around other stars. And what's amazing is that in just this small region alone, we've found, I think last time I checked, I need to update my numbers, but the last time I checked was about 4,500. But we found this many exoplanets around other stars. How many of those are within the Goldilocks zone? This many, I don't know. Within this small region within our Milky Way, we have already found all of these planets. What's the odds of them having the right conditions for life? Even if it's, 1%, 0.1%, you can go even lower, then more than likely we're going to find life on other planets. I wanted to offer this video as almost like a counter narrative of this idea that life on this planet is incredibly unlikely, to provide evidence of a creator, and it's not something that I've really heard people talking about, and I think it's an interesting angle that I think some people would be very interested in. It's not very fleshed out. This is just my basic knowledge. Well, this is just my undergraduate knowledge of star formation and planetary formation. If I'm wrong, if I've missed anything or glossed over anything, or if I should go into something a bit more detail, let me know in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear what people have got to say about this. And yeah, I just love it. I think it's really interesting. If you're interested in more space and more sort of topical stuff like this, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching.